Okay, so here's another story about growing up in this haunted house in Alaska. And again, it was a house on Hawkins Avenue. And this happened quite often, but there was one particular night I remember. So, growing up in this house, I lived with my sisters and brothers. And we were a little crazy, a little nutty as kids are. So my mom, she had a lot of like stuff she really loved, house full of like very dainty things. So she had statues and brass oil lamps of women taking a shower. I don't know if you ever remember that, women taking a shower and had little oil streams that would go down. And she had a red velvet couch and matching glass tables and golden shelves and things. And so she had a lot of stuff that wasn't really compatible with kids. So she had this couch that she really loved. It was like a red velvet couch, and it had like a floral print on the pad on the cushions, and had some like a wood veneer on the front. And it was like one of her favorite things. And I remember her wrapping the cushions in this clear plastic, so that us kids drinking whatever Hawaiian punch, things that stain, if we dropped it, it wouldn't ruin the couch. So the house was pretty much like covered in plastic. There were like plastic runners on the floor. Again, the couch cushions were covered with plastic. There were doilies everywhere. And she did this in an attempt to like save her things from us kids who were always running around with punch or paint or stuff all over our hands. So when you sat on the couch, it made a very distinct sound. So it was a very thick kind of plastic. I don't know if you're familiar with visqueen or anything like that, but when you sit on it, because it was taped shut, it would crumple, and then this air would rush out as you settled into the couch, and it's very distinct. There's nothing else like that sound, and you knew when you were going to go sit down, it was going to make this horrible noise. So everyone in the living room would know that you're sitting down, and everyone would wait for everyone to settle, and then like watch the show or whatever. So that was all set up in the living room. In the bedrooms and stuff, that's kind of your own. Those are your own things, so those things weren't covered with plastic. It was just this in the living room and parts of the dining room, like the dining room chairs. Again, the cushions were covered with plastic, and if you sat on them, it was a very similar kind of plastic sound. And then anywhere you sat, in the chairs or the couch, the dining room chairs or the couch, you would hear like a settling of air. And you can also, if you rocked back and forth as you were settling into your seat, you would hear noises, very distinct sounds. So my parents were kind of night owls at times. So when they put us off the bed, this is like 1970, 1980s into the 80s. So TV wasn't what it was like now. We didn't have like gazillion channels. We had at most, I think at that time, like 14, 12 usually. So when HBO and stuff came on, you could catch extra programming, but they would put them on at weird hours because they were trying to fill their broadcast day. My parents would often get up at night and watch TV, so my dad would try to catch that day's boxing match that he couldn't catch earlier, and they were doing a recap, or my mom knew that on some other channel that like Anne of Green Gables or something was playing. So they used to get up at night and watch TV, and I would know that because I was in my bed, and I could, if I listened very carefully and looked out the door, I could see the light from the TV light up the hallway, and you could hear a little bit of the TV running. And we had one of those older TVs, not so much like the new ones today. They were large TVs, almost like cabinets. And so when you turned them on, they had a very large tube. Like it was a very, very substantial compared to the TVs today. Like it's the size of a dresser. So when you turn the TV on, you could hear the tube like warm up and buzz. And on top of that, you would hear the volume of whatever the program was that was playing. So, again, my parents were night owls at times. So they could watch the programs that they had missed, they were working parents, so the stuff that they wanted to see wasn't there wasn't an opportunity. You'd have to get up at the time that was playing. That was often 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. So this one night, this one particular night, I was sleeping in bed and I woke up, and I don't remember why. I just woke up. I shared a bedroom with my brother. So I looked over at him thinking that he had maybe said something or tried to get my attention, but that wasn't the case. I looked over at him and he was fast asleep. And again, this house on Hawkins used to kind of freak me out a little bit. When we first moved in, I didn't think about it very much. It wasn't really until, I want to say like late 70s to early 80s. My sister was older than me, like significantly. She was probably getting into her teens or preteens. So she took a liking to these scary movies that would come on. And at the time, I think like The Fog and stuff was coming out. So when it would hit HBO, she wanted to see all that stuff. But she had little brothers in the house, and we had never watched like scary movies. So I think she tried to catch a few, and they were on at hours where my parents were at work, but us kids were there, and she wanted to catch a glimpse of it. And so like flipping back and forth from a happy program to the scary program, my brother and I weren't accustomed to watching scary movies, so this is kind of a freaky thing for us. In fact, I think it made it even scarier flipping back and forth, because when you flipped away, you kind of had this like nice feeling of relief, but then as soon as you flip back, there's like this anxiousness that you're waiting to see something you're not supposed to see on top of that, because our parents didn't want us to watch these movies. So on top of being a scary movie, and we were going to see something scary, there's this other thing of like, you're not supposed to be doing this. So again, my sisters were older than I was, and so they were kind of interested in seeing these programs that they're not supposed to watch, that are suddenly on HBO and accessible to them. So why did that come up? Well, again, the house wasn't terribly scary to me, I think, until my sister started watching those programs. And so in the back of my mind, those kind of things were kind of rolling through my head. So the nights became very difficult at times because it was very dark, and I'm watching things, and I don't really have a separation between the reality and the stories of these scary movies. So I'm trying to process these things inside my mind. So getting back to the room, so I had all of a sudden woke up in the middle of the night, looked over at my brother, thinking, well, maybe he woke me up, and that wasn't the case. And so I was sitting there and scared. I often woke up scared in the middle of the night. So I kind of sat up a little bit, and I could hear someone watching TV at the end of the hall. Now, I knew that someone was in there because I could hear the crumpling of the couch, the plastic that's on the couch. I could hear them settle around, and kind of when you change the channels, even though it was one of those dial ones, there was after HBO came out, they kind of gave everyone remotes. So there was like suddenly everyone had remote controls, but when you hit it, you would hear that distinctive change in the channel. Even though you couldn't hear necessarily the voices, you could hear the change in the tone of the buzzing of the TV, if that makes any sense. So if you were zzz, and then someone would change the channel, zzz, zzz, zzz. So I knew in my bed, I knew someone was watching TV. I knew they were sitting there because I could hear the crumpling of the plastic again on the couch, and I could hear them flip through the channels. Not necessarily hear the audio on the channels, although something was, I could kind of hear talking. It wasn't distinctive. I could tell, though, that someone's flipping through the channels. So I thought, well, I don't want to sit in my bed here. I'm already scared. And I'm young. I'm probably about 7, if at the most at this point, maybe 8. Again, this is 1980. So I'm sitting in my bed, and I'm thinking, well, I would rather be with somebody right now who was awake, other than my brother, who slept through almost anything and was not comforting at all, because if something scary was happening, I'm sure he would just sleep right through it. So I thought, well, I'll just go down into the living room. I'll just go down the hall into the living room and just hang out with whoever's in there. I've done that before. My dad had been watching boxing, or my mom watching, and I'd sit there until I got tired, and then they would take me back. So this particular night, I thought, okay, well, I'll just go down the hallway. So I got up and went to the door, And I looked down the hallway, and sure enough, I could see the lights from the TV dancing on the walls. I couldn't see the TV directly because it was kind of around the corner. And I could hear the crumpling of the couch again. So I thought, well, I'll just walk down the hall. The hall wasn't terribly long. It was probably 10 feet, possibly 15 at most. So it wasn't a terribly long hall. The house itself was a 3-bedroom house, and there was a 1 bathroom, and then there was a furnace room, and then the living room. So I started walking down the hallway, which is kind of freaky to begin with when you're a little boy or you're just young, and you're walking down the hall, and all the doorways are huge. And I'm kind of walking down the hall, and I'm seeing all the lights dance on the wall from the TV. And I'm walking past everyone's bedroom, and I get to just before the living room is the furnace room on the right side. Now, for some reason, I don't know why, my parents never closed this door, and this furnace room used to freak us out. I never saw anything in particular in there that made me think it was dangerous or there's something horrible in there. It's just that room was weird, it had a furnace in it, and it would make weird noises. And as you walked by, it would always start up and freak you out. And it was always very dark. So I don't know why. Again, my parents kept the door open. So I was kind of going down the hallway, and I got to the furnace room. And the furnace room, again, is the last room on the right side before you go into the living room. So I'm trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? I have to go past the furnace room. There's no other way around that. So I get myself all ready, and I run past the furnace room, and luckily the furnace doesn't start up. So I run in the living room, and I run up to behind the couch to see who's there. And as I walk in, there's nothing. There's no sounds. The TV is not on. All I see is a little bit of moonlight peeking through the shears of the curtain, and all of a sudden there's nothing. Like, it's so bizarre to be. It was weird because when you just experience something, you don't have a doubt about it, right? So if you were just talking to somebody, there's no doubt that you're talking to somebody at that moment, right? It's really weird to have reality unplugged from you so suddenly. I'm like, I can't believe that I made this mistake. I heard the TV. I heard the crumpling of the couch. I heard the flickering of the TV screen. And I heard the same sounds that it makes when you change the channel at a very low volume. And I could actually hear, as I was coming down the hallway, I could hear the voices from the TV. There was no mistaking my mind. That TV was on. Somebody was sitting there, because I could hear the plastic on the couch crumpling. And as soon as I got out there, it's like there was nothing. It was almost like as soon as I ran out, they just turned the TV off and like hid, which was not the case. Because, well, my parents don't move that fast, and the other kids in the house wouldn't have been able to do that, move that fast either, and they wouldn't have been watching TV. So, again, I'm standing there. I run out from the hallway, which is just already freaked me out, and I'm standing in a very cold living room, again, only lit by the lights outside, possibly moonlight, and I'm standing there, and I swear the TV was just on, but now it's dark, and I'm thinking, who was out here? And if they're here, and it's not my parents, and it's not my brothers and sisters, what is in this room? And if they could be standing right in front of me looking at me, and I can't see because the light that I thought was coming from the TV is now gone. So my eyes hadn't adjusted. So all these things kind of freaking me out, and the cold air kind of nipping at me. And I'm just like, well, I can't stay in this room. I have to go back. So I turn around, and just as I turn around, the furnace starts up. And I'm just totally freaking out. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I have to go by the furnace, but I can't stay in this room. And this is happening very fast. So I literally run to the hallway, jump into the room, in the living room. Nothing's there. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I think I have to go back. So I'm thinking whatever is in this room is probably still here and is probably standing right next to me, and I can't see or feel or do anything because I'm so like freaked out and it's so dark. So I think, okay, I need to go back to my bedroom. So I flipped the lights on in the hallway, thinking, okay, at least that's going to give me some solace, because I know there's a light switch at the other end, and I'll just hit it, turn it off, and go back to the bed. So I turn the switch on, which is, again, in the living room. It's not that the switch is in the hallway. So I turn on the light from inside the living room, and I go into the hallway, and I run past the furnace, which is now on the left. I don't look. I just hear it roar as I go on. So again, I went to the living room. It starts to start up, and as I run by, it starts to roar. I run down the hall, which to me must have felt like forever, because the hallway felt really long. Like, you ever see that scene in Poltergeist where they're running down the hall and they seem to run and it gets longer and longer? It was like just like that. So I run down the end of the hall and I see the light switch. So I'm trying to run over, and the light switch is kind of in between two doors, which kind of freaks me out too, because I keep thinking someone's going to pop around from the corner or something. So I get there and I try to hit the switch and run into the room, and I miss. And so I'm standing, I have to turn around, so I'm standing in the middle of the hall, and I have to go and turn the switch off. So I looked down the hallway, and it just, there's nothing there. Again, there's no TV, there's nothing. All I see is darkness. I can barely see past the shelf that's there as you go into the living room. And because the furnace had kicked on, this blast of cold air comes following and just hits me like a little bit of breeze. Pooh! That freaks me out. And I flip the switch down, and I run into the bedroom, and I pull the sheets over my head, and I stay there. And I must have tensed up for hours before I fell asleep. But stuff like that happened a lot. And I never really told anybody, because it used to freak me out. And I'm just a kid, and when you live in a house like that, you don't want to talk about it to other people, especially if you're in the house. So it wasn't until after we had moved away that I had actually mentioned something like that. And it turns out that it actually happened to everyone in my family. It happened to my mother, it happened to my brother, my sisters, my father, everybody. So, same story. They woke up in the middle of the night for some reason. They didn't know why they woke up. And so they went down to the living room to see who's up. My parents were probably like, well, who's up? They should be in bed. Or my sister's like, well, I feel weird. I'm going to go look for some comfort. And again, they tell me the same thing that I experienced. They walk into the living room. They're standing behind the couch. And as they walk in, nobody is there. There's no one on the couch. The TV is off. And there's just a little bit of light coming in through the windows. And they swear, just like I swear. Like, there's no... It's like being unplugged from reality all of a sudden. You're there and you know someone's in there. All the signs that you have that somebody is in the room with you is there. But all of a sudden it's removed. And you're there by yourself in a very cold room. And you're just puzzled. And you just can't process it. And you got to run back to the last time you had comfort, which is in your bedroom, and hope that you can fall asleep. So again, really weird, this experience I had, which turned out to be everyone else's experience in the house as well. But again, we didn't discuss it until after we had moved out, because, when you're in a situation like that, it's hard to process. And I think that if we had talked about it, it would have been easier for all of us to process, but it's such a jarring experience that, I totally understand why we never talked about it until after we had moved out. So again, that's the crumpling couch, one of the things that happened to me growing up in this haunted house in Alaska on an avenue called Hawkins. Thanks for listening, and hope you have a good night.